So for the final step of this exercise, I want to show people how to work with multiple artboards and how to export when you're working with multiple artboards, and also talk a bit about why you'd want to work with multiple artboards and show people how this is potentially going to save you a little bit of time on this exercise and also on future projects when you are developing different versions, but versions that utilize similar visual components. So this doesn't have to be just for UX UI designs. This can be if you're working with a poster, and let's say the client is wanting to see 3 different versions, but the poster is using almost all the same elements. So you're just moving things around, and you want to be able to easily say, okay, first of all, I'm going to reuse as many components as I can so they don't have to redraw things. And then I also want to have version control so I know, which version corresponds with which design. And sometimes it can be helpful to have different versions within the same file so you're not having to open multiple files and maybe there's like a very slight change to one over the other. And then on top of that, you want to be able to locate those things once a client says, okay, I want to go with that one, but actually, can you take the visual placement from this one example and then combine it with the colors from this other example. So it can be really helpful to have all those in one file. And this is something that we're not going to be checking for, so you're not required to do this, but it's going to save you time in the long run. And I just want everyone to know that this is something that exists within Illustrator. This is a functionality of Illustrator and with vector tools in general. This is something that I very recently learned about, and it has saved me so much time. So these are all these ways of understanding these tools and really knowing the ins and outs of these different tools and being able to utilize them to not only create the visuals that you want to, but to know what is possible and to just streamline that creation process. Because the faster you're able to work with things and the more you're able to work with these tools in ways that you're not spending a bunch of time trying to figure out how to do something, the more creativity you can have with them. So let's go into artboards. It seems so boring, but it's really amazing. All right, so one aspect of this exercise is going to be creating 2 versions that are utilizing most of the same visual components. So one thing you can do, and I've set this file up so that I have all these different components on their own layers, and I've shown how that is something that's been very helpful when I've been trying to edit things, change the layout. I'm trying to select groupings of things, but I don't want to select the entire background image. So I have all this set up, and one of the drawbacks of having things on layers is that if you copy and paste them, so for instance, if I wanted to copy and paste all these things and then create a new layer, or just create a duplicate of that, when I copy and paste it, it puts it all into one layer. So it's really hard to, so the other thing that you could do is you could select everything and then you could hold down Option and then you could hold down Shift, and so now you have a duplicate of everything and they're all in their same layers. So now if I go here, I'll just hide this background layer so you can see, and why is that? Oh, and that's different because this one's on the artboard and the one on the left is not on the artboard, it's on the workspace. But then when you're trying to export these, you're having to move these things around. So I show people how to export and that you're clipping to the artboard. So if I were to try to export this, let's say I make a change to this. So I'm changing the color of these buttons, and so this is going to be my second interface, my second version. So I will have to export this, and then I'm going to have to go in to the file. I'm going to have to move things around, move this over so that it's on the artboard. It can get a little bit monotonous, and it can also get, these are all these opportunities to make mistakes. And I don't know how many times I've done this where I've accidentally locked something and not realized it. I'm in a hurry, I'm trying to get this thing in before the deadline. I'm sure no one here ever thinks about that. I'll go and export this and realize that I didn't, and at the end, after I've turned it in and sent it to the client, they're like, I haven't actually seen any differences between these. I'm like, what are you talking about? I sent you 2 versions. And it's because the changes that I actually made, I had them locked in a layer when I hurriedly moved them over onto the artboard so that I could clip to the artboard and export that really quickly before the deadline at midnight or 2 in the morning. I forgot to actually incorporate the changes that I made. So I essentially sent them the same file. Such a headache. And it all just turns into me having to go back and redo things. And there is actually an easier way. So I want to show people that. So let's go back here. All right, so working with multiple artboards in one file in one workspace. So this is a great thing that has really saved a lot of time. I'm going to show the most basic way to do this, which is using the Artboard tool to then duplicate your artboard. So making sure that I have all of my layers unlocked, and I'm going to talk about why that's important in a second. I'm going to select the Artboard tool, and then I'm going to hold down. I'm going to move it up here to where it says Artboard 1. It's going to say that whatever that you have named your artboard. For the most part, if those of you who haven't really worked with artboards, it's probably set the default, which is Artboard 1. I'm going to hold down Option. I'm going to hold down Shift, and so I'm holding down Shift just so when I clone and duplicate this artboard, it will stay in alignment with the original artboard. So I'm holding down Shift, but Option is the most important thing. And what this is doing is this is making a new artboard. So it's copying the artboard, and then it's also copying every single visual element that was on that artboard and a part of that artboard, and that was on a layer that was unlocked. So the reason why it's important to lock these is if I had locked the buttons and I'd gone to duplicate this artboard, I drag this over and you see I do have the artboard copied, but it did not duplicate the layers that were locked. So layers that are locked or layers that are invisible, it's not going to duplicate. So I'm going to unlock that. I'm going to do this again. And so now I have Artboard 2, and right now it says Artboard 1 copy. There are places to change that, but for this assignment, you don't really need to because you're only working with 2. And when I go to my selection tool, I now see that I actually have 2 artboards. And each of these elements is still on the same layer. So if I'm wanting to work with this, and so for instance, I'm going to make some very quick changes here so that this looks different. So I'm just working with my buttons now. So I've locked everything else. And since I duplicated the artboard, it is maintaining that, that layer order. So I'm going to move this. Well, let's just delete that here. And I'm going to change the color on this. So I'm just doing this very quickly so I have 2 distinct versions. And then let's go with some Hulu updates. So Hulu just made a really interesting choice with their user interface. A lot of people really dislike it. And this is one of the elements that drives me insane, is that they've put the slider bar across the entire screen. So when you're watching something on your iPad and you're trying to maybe pause or fast forward or rewind a couple of seconds, if you accidentally don't hit the buttons, you end up just scrolling forward really far into your TV show, and then you find out what happens, and then you're really upset. I don't know, that's just personal experience. So I'm just recreating this very quickly. This is just to show my second version, and you're all going to be doing this to some extent. And then the specifics of that are in the Canvas requirements. So let's make this a little opaque slider. Okay, so now I have my 2 versions. I'm ready to turn this in, and I want to export these really quickly. So now that I have 2 artboards, I can do this very quickly, even if I'm working with an older version of Illustrator. So first, let me show people how to do this with the CC versions. I have both these artboards. I know that I want to export both of these as separate files, however. So I'm going to go up to File, I'm going to Export, I'm going to go to Export As, and then I'm going to say JPEG, and then I'm going to say Use Artboards. And so what this allows you to do, so right now I have all selected, and you can see down here that there is a range. If I had, say, 10 artboards, I could say, oh, I only want you to do from 5 to 10. So this is a really huge time saver. So I'm going to say Export. I'm going to say these are all the settings that I outline. I'm just going to set this to RGB, but all these specifics are outlined in the canvas requirements. I'm going to say OK. And now when I go to open, I actually see here that I have my 2 JPEGs, and it's so Illustrator has exported each of these as its own JPEG file, and it's even ordered them for me, numbered them for me. So I have both versions, and now when I'm going to submit these to Canvas, I can just upload both of these. And that is probably one of the easiest things. So it doesn't seem like that big of a deal when you're only working with 2 screens or 2 designs. I've been recently working on this project where I'm using Artboards and I'm creating different versions of the same, different colored versions of the same sticker design. We got 15 of those. And so when I have to export these to send them to print, I'm very happy to be using the Artboards, because then I have one file, I have 15 different versions of the same graphic but with different colors applied to them. I can change each of those different Artboards and fine-tune those as much as I want, and then when I want to export them and send them to the printer, all I have to do is go to the one file, export them. I can say export all of them. I can say, oh, I'm just going to export this one and pull that one out and send those all at once. And it's such a huge time saver. And it's something that'll probably really even help with this exercise. So that was just to show how to do that with export as in the CC versions. And now for those of you that are still working with Save for Web, you can also do this. And the only change with this is that you need to do these each one at a time, but all you need to do is select within the artboard that you're trying to export. So I'm going to export this one first. So I'm going to just click any object that's within that artboard. And then I'm going to go up to File. I'm going to go to Save for Web, which in earlier versions of Illustrator is under Save, but in CC it's under Export. I'm going to go Save for Web. I'm going to set all of these according to what is being asked for in Canvas, and I know that's going to be 100. And then I'm also going to make sure that I have Clip to Artboard selected. I'm going to say Save, and then I'll just put a new number there. And then, so that has saved that one. And now in order to export the next one, I just need to click in here. In the next artboard, click an object anywhere in that artboard, and then do the exact same thing. So you're able to utilize the functionality of Artboards using either versions of Illustrator, and this is definitely something that can help when you are working with visuals or graphics or designs that are utilizing a lot of the same graphical components, but maybe have slight changes, and you don't want to be having to keep track of multiple files.